Once upon a time, the town of Baltis was a beautiful place where everything was magical, with a lady moving the fountain and kids playing around with magic. However, times changed. There was a great foreign war, and after that people just stopped believing, and nothing felt magical anymore. Strange clouds also rolled in, and the town got stuck, but there is still hope that things could get unstuck. Following this, in the same town, there lives an orphaned boy named Peter, who is being raised by an old soldier called Vilna Lutz, who only knows about fighting and hardship. But Peter knows that there is more to life. Vilna sends Peter to the market square to buy the smallest fish and some bread, where Peter almost loses his coin, and as he follows it, he finds a strange fortune-teller's tent, with a notice that she answers the most difficult questions one has, for the price of a single coin. Peter then walks in, and finds a fortune-teller who, surprisingly, knows that he lives with his guardian, Vilna, who is raising him to be a penny-pinching soldier like himself. Peter then reluctantly hands her his coin, and before he could ask, the lady reads his mind, and tells him that whoever he is looking for is alive. He then tells her that when her mother died in the war, she was expecting a child, and Sergeant Vilna had told him that the baby died, but Peter remembers holding her, and the lady confirms it. Now, for his one question, Peter asks how to find her, and the fortune-teller tells her to follow the elephant, which is an underwhelming answer to him. Later back at home, Peter tells his guardian Vilna that he learned from a fortune-teller that her sister lives, and he explains that there was once a young soldier called Roman de Smet, who missed his home and always read a book to remind him of home. So Vilna stole the book, which turned the guy into a fearsome soldier. Vilna then brushes aside Peter's questions and says that the elephant story is just a fairy tale. Vilna then spends his next minutes watching the strategy of cats finding food, while he makes Peter march around in the house, chanting an army poem. Peter's marching disturbs their neighbor living below them, and they're worried that a child shouldn't be marching like that. Meanwhile, at the same night across town, there is a show with a famous magician, and the fortune-teller watches from the audience. The magician disappoints the audience with his failed tricks, and seeing the crowd's frowning faces, he decides to perform one last trick in which he manages to produce sparks of magic from his hands. This shocks the audience, and just then an elephant falls in from the roof, injuring the volunteer, and everyone rushes out in panic. Later that night, Peter dreams about holding his little sister, and wakes up before he uses the toilet in his dreams. The following day in the marketplace, Peter hears rumors about an elephant which fell from the sky, and as he rushes home in excitement, he meets his neighbor, Matien, holding a newspaper with the elephant story, and he is so happy for Peter, who plans to find his sister. Meanwhile, the famous magician who got locked up for scaring people with an elephant, which crippled a volunteer, tries to burst out of prison using magic, but he ends up creating plants and butterflies. Later, Peter's neighbor, Captain Matien, learns that the elephant is being locked up like a criminal to be gotten rid of, and he decides to reach out to the king, who likes to be entertained. The king immediately asks to see the elephant, and on the day he visits Baltis, Matien invites Peter to the guest lounge. The guards unveil the magnificent elephant, which mesmerizes the audience, but it starts to appear agitated, and Peter manages to calm it down. The Countess of Baltis asks Peter to stay and tend to her elephant, but Peter asks to be given the elephant so that he can find his sister, and the king comes up with a proper deal for him. Peter is asked to do 3 impossible tasks, and in exchange, he gets the elephant. The first impossible task is for Peter to fight against the king's toughest soldier using a sword. Later, Matien teaches Peter how to hold a sword, and he also pities Peter for not having a proper family, just like he has no children, and he wishes to be there for him. Elsewhere at the orphanage, a young girl named Adele wakes up in the middle of the night and informs a guardian sister about her dream of an elephant that took her away. But sister tells her that the world is cruel, and the orphanage is her real home, which took her in after the death of her mother and brother. That same night, the elephant also dreams about reuniting with her loving family, somewhere in the plains of Masai Mara, but it all seems impossible in her current situation. Later, Peter visits the elephant and asks it to take him to his sister. But that's not how elephants communicate, so Peter has to fight as planned. The following day, the civilians crowd into the palace for the fight, and the magician hears the story from prison. Peter is matched against a giant called Sergeant Desmet, but he runs away, and Desmet chases him. Peter then figures out that Desmet is the guy whom Vilna trained into a fearsome warrior after hiding his book. So he steals the book from Vilna and shows it to Desmet, who suddenly remembers how his caring mother used to read it to him. Desmet then throws down his sword and tells Peter that he hopes to change from his ways as a soldier, and everyone celebrates Peter's calm victory. For the second impossible task, the king asks Peter to fly. Later, the young girl Adele comes to know about the magical elephant in the city, and she convinces the sister to take her to see it. Elsewhere, the crippled lady revisits the jailed magician to remind him of the incident, but he just keeps creating more plants and animals. Later, Peter struggles with how to fly, and his neighbor, Matien, invites him for dinner, where Peter gets to taste stew for the first time, which he really likes. Meanwhile, Adele and the sister sneak into town to find the elephant. In a flashback, Vilna recalls how he thought the nurse and Peter's sister Adele died in an explosion after he rescued Peter, but on the other hand, the sister survived with the girl and thought the soldier died with Peter in the explosion. And she also wishes she could have kept the boy with her. The following day, the people are gathered, waiting for Peter to fly, and Adele and sister are also in the crowd. Peter then jumps from the palace rooftops and pulls out a parachute, which he uses to fly around safely, and the people celebrate him. Now, for the third impossible task, Peter is asked to make the Countess laugh, which is difficult, since the Countess is always bitter, especially after she lost her brother during the Great War. Later, Adele goes to greet the elephant from her dreams, and there she meets Peter, who needs a list of jokes and memes for his next task, but the sister arrives to take away Adele. Later that night, after drinking 6 beers straight, Vilna admits that his sister was alive, but he lost her and the nurse in an explosion in the garrison, and he regrets not saving them both. However, Peter still believes in the impossible since Vilna didn't actually see his sister dead, and Vilna now also believes in him. Peter then spends that night wandering the city, designing royal memes for the Countess, as the magician watches him from prison. The magician then reveals to the crippled lady that he was disappointed when he saw people hating on his failed tricks, but now he has real magic, and he also believes in the impossible. That night, Peter has a dream where he sees the elephant playing with her family, and when he wakes up the following day, everyone is gathered for his third task, and he promises to help the elephant return home. Peter cracks a joke from a folklore involving a chicken and a toad, but only an old man understands it. The Countess tries to fake a laugh to help Peter, but the king detects her deception and he decides that Peter has failed to win the elephant. Peter asks the king to send the innocent elephant back home, but he refuses and orders the guards to capture the elephant. However, the fortune teller, surprisingly, stops the time, walks in and places a cat close to the elephant, and she says Peter is not alone. After she leaves, the elephant smells the cat and sneezes at the king, covering him in mucus. The Countess laughs at it, and everyone joins in, and the king congratulates Peter for making her laugh, which is all he ever wanted. Peter wins the elephant, and as everyone is figuring out how to get her home, Peter suggests the magician could help, and he prepares as everyone gathers around. The magician then says a few of those magical chants, and the elephant disappears. Suddenly, after so many years, the clouds open up and the sunlight shines on the city. As Adele is talking with Peter, the sister comes to take her home, while Peter's guardian Vilna also enters the scene, and the sister is surprised to meet the soldier who she thought was dead. Peter and Adele then discover they are siblings and they embrace each other, and everyone is happy for the great reunion. The magician apologizes to the crippled lady for the harm he caused her, and hands her some lilies before leaving town. Later, the fortune teller shows how the magical town has been restored, and while the crippled lady is narrating a story to children, she stands up, but doesn't notice it. Meanwhile, Vilna, the sister, Matien and his wife, and Peter and his sister Adele have all formed a caring family who now enjoy dinner together. As for the elephant, she got reunited with her loving family, and as she is playing around, she never forgets Peter. Later that night, Peter plays with his sister, and he conjures up some magical sparks of light, which float into the sky to form stars, bringing the exciting film to an end. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to our channel. I'll be back with another interesting movie recap. Until then, take care.